Welcome to another video for Design 224 CAD certification, and in this video we're going to be basically going over some tips for passing the exam. Now I know this is probably a little bit early as we haven't gone over any practice tests or really talked too much about specific topics, but I think this is good to go over at the beginning so you kind of understand some strategies for passing this test and also know what's going to be expected and some of the tips and tricks you can use. That way, as we go through the practice tests over the next couple of weeks, you'll have some of these tips and tricks under your belt already, and you can try using them on those practice tests. So some of this stuff isn't necessarily going to be useful to you quite yet, but I want you to be aware of it so that when we do the practice tests, you can try to utilize it and maximize your score on each of those practice tests. So looking at the actual certified professional exam that you're going to come take in person on campus on one of those test dates that you've given me in the survey, the test, like I mentioned, is 35 questions total. Now you get 120 minutes to finish the test, which is 2 hours. And at the end of the 2 hours, if you're not done, you don't fail the test. It's just that your test automatically gets submitted and graded. So you have basically 2 hours to work on it. And at the end of that 2 hours, it gets turned in whether you're done or not. Now, out of those 35 questions, you have to get a 77%, which is 27 correct. So you're able to miss 8 questions and still pass the test. And like I mentioned before, you don't have to pass the test to pass the Ivy Tech DESN 224 course. So our expectation for you is that you basically attempt this test and learn about industry certifications and get some exposure to them, but we're not going to require you to pass this certification in order to pass this class. So we just want you to give it a good, honest, fair attempt where you give it your best shot. So as you're working on the test, don't bother saving your drawings. It's going to basically waste your time if you save these drawings as you go through the test. So you have 35 questions, which gives you roughly, 3 minutes on each question, give or take. So if you spend a minute saving each file when you're done, that's going to chew up a bunch of your time on the test. So you could lose up to a half hour on this test just because you wasted your time saving files. So when you're done with a question, close out the AutoCAD drawing. Don't save it. Don't waste your time. Just dump it and move on to the next question because you want to maximize the 120 minutes as you take this test. So think about test taking strategies as you do this. If there's a question you don't know the answer to and it's frustrating you, move on. There might be some other ones that you do know. So don't spend 15 minutes on a question you don't know or you're not sure about that you're going to get wrong anyway, and then you don't have enough time to finish questions that you do know or you could get correct. So if you don't know, skip it. You can always come back to it later. The exam will let you go forwards and backwards between the questions as many times as you want. So you can basically, go back and look at any question at any time in the exam, and then when you're done, you submit the whole thing at once. So feel free to work your way around the test as you do it. Expect a lot of fill in the blank questions. About 3/4 of them are fill in the blank. And when I say fill in the blank, they're not asking for a word or an answer here necessarily. They're asking for usually a dimension or a distance or a coordinate. The most popular way that they do this on the test is they will have you take a drawing that they've already created. So you'll open a drawing file, alter it, and then after you alter it, they'll want a dimension or a coordinate. And the two best ways to find those are the distance command, DI, and the ID command, ID. So ID is great for looking up a specific point. So for instance, I'll go ahead and show you real quick. Let's say they give me a drawing that has a circle in it and a line. And they tell me in the test, take this circle and move it so that its center point sits exactly on the end of this line. And then after you do that, tell me the coordinates of the center point. So I'm going to take this and use my move command and move the center point so it's on the end of the line. And now I could use the ID command. Just by typing in ID, it says specify point. I can click right on the end of the line. And then here is what I would key in to the test. 39.1136, 17.3227, and they will have a box for X and a box for Y. So this is very similar to how they will have you do the test. you don't ever actually upload a file to be graded. You're just giving numbers and distances and coordinates. So it's very different than what you would think. Using the list command and the properties menu are also very helpful during the test for looking up values, statuses, or coordinates. So they also like to ask you about the properties of things as you take the test. So for instance, they may say, tell me the circumference of this circle for the test, and then you have to type in the circumference of the circle. If you don't know how to find that, it becomes very difficult. But the best way to figure out things in your drawing is the list command if you're trying to find sizes or numbers or figures. So I'm just going to type in list after I click on this circle, and here it will tell me some information about the circle with the list command. So it tells me here the item is a circle. It tells me what layer it's on, where its center point is located, what its radius is, its circumference, the area inside of it. So these are all the types of things that they might ask you on the test. So ID and list are probably your two most useful commands as you take this test. Because it's a very weird abstract style of test because they have to be able to grade it. So the way that they've decided to grade it is by having you type in numbers. People also ask me a lot, what about these decimals on the end? Does it matter how many I put in, or should I type them all or some of them? They will have the files on the test set up already so that you key in exactly the number of decimal points that you see pop up. So don't worry about the precision on these decimal points. Type in the whole thing exactly as you see it, because they have these decimals set already in the files they're going to give you. So type in exactly what you see. Okay, going back, there are some multiple choice and matching questions on the test as well. So they may give you, for instance, a multiple choice question that asks you about the fillet tool, or a matching question about the print command or the plot command. So there are some matching and multiple choice questions also. They're not all fill in the blank. Make sure you know how to use Alt-Tab on your keyboard, because you're going to have basically two things going when you're working on the test. You're going to have the testing software, and then you're going to have AutoCAD running in the background. So you have to be able to switch back and forth between those two programs during the actual test. And during the test, your command line down here at the bottom that you're used to using probably is not going to be visible. The testing software takes it away so that you can't switch back and forth between the programs with it. And that's really a security thing, is they don't want the test questions getting out. But the best way to switch back and forth between your programs if your taskbar down here is missing is just to do Alt-Tab on your keyboard. So if you hold down Alt and hit Tab, you can see here that I can cycle through every window that I have open on my computer. So I can switch back and forth between AutoCAD and Word very easily here by Alt-Tab. So make sure you know how to use Alt-Tab on your keyboard to switch back and forth between the test and AutoCAD. Number 8 we already talked about, so type in your answers exactly as you see them in AutoCAD. Use the exact number of decimal points. Don't add decimal points or take decimal points off. Don't put in units, so don't type in feet or miles or inches. Just type in the number only, exactly as you see it. Number 9, in AutoCAD, the help files do not work. Normally where you would hit F1 or go to the question mark or type in help, it would bring up the help menu. The testing browser will kill that every time you try to open it. Now, it doesn't kick you out of the test, but it just keeps it from opening. So normally where you'd hit F1 in AutoCAD to bring up the help menu, if you hit F1 during the test, nothing's going to happen. But the nice thing is that the rollover tooltips in AutoCAD do still work. And the rollover tooltips I'm talking about is, for instance, if I hover over the circle tool, notice how it rolls out or gives you a rollover where it will show you how that tool works and kind of give you a tip on how to use it. So some of these lesser known tools, like maybe, if you're not used to the stretch command, hover over the stretch command and it will kind of give you a description on how that tool is to be used. So that is one way you can still get some help and some tips while you're doing the test. So these do still work in the testing software. They didn't cancel those out, but the help files do not work. If you get stuck on a multiple choice or a matching question, try checking your answer choices in AutoCAD. So you can sort of use AutoCAD to look up the answers sometimes. So if they give you a question and you're not sure, look at the different alternatives in the multiple choice question and try them and see if they really do work the way that they're being described in the question. So a lot of times you can work backwards in AutoCAD and figure out whether or not a specific option in the multiple choice question is right or wrong. And we'll look at some ways to do that as we do some practice tests throughout the semester. But you can actually try and test things in AutoCAD and see if they work the way that the question says they do, kind of like a true-false method almost. When you take the test, there are also picture previews that are built into the test. So they may tell you to open up a file and modify it. And the picture they give you in the test is of the file modified and finished the way it should look. So you can compare your AutoCAD drawing to the picture in the test. And if your AutoCAD drawing doesn't match what you see in the testing window, then you know you did something wrong. So you can almost use the test a lot of times to tell you if you're right or not. So compare your AutoCAD drawing to the test drawing in the picture preview before you put in any coordinates or look up any values, and that way you'll know if you're right or wrong or not. Make sure you know how to use O-snaps to measure dimensions, especially the insertion O-snap. Insertion is one that a lot of people don't know, and it doesn't get used very much. So, for instance, if I go to my O-snaps, so here are the O-snaps you're probably most familiar with. Most of the time, if I have people in a class, I tell them to use these 5: endpoint, midpoint, center, node, quadrant. The lesser known ones over here can be used on the test. So something you want to study is some of these lesser known O-snaps, especially this one. They love this one on the test for some reason, the insertion O-snap. And the insertion O-snap is basically, if I have an object like this, for instance, let's say I have a block right here. Maybe this is some kind of indicator for a gauge or something, like a needle, and it rotates around. The insertion point would be down here. But if I don't have my insertion O-snap turned on, there's no way I can lock onto that. So having your insertion O-snap turned on will let you lock onto things out here in space that aren't on any of the geometry. So locking onto endpoints and midpoints and center points and quadrants is easy, but a lot of people don't know about that insertion O-snap right here. And so when they have to lock onto an insertion point in the test, they don't know how to do it. So we'll talk about that some more also because it's a really popular one. But make sure you know the insertion O-snap and start practicing with it. Really lesser known one. Make sure you familiarize yourself with some of these following commands, and we'll work on them as we go through this semester. The stretch command is a lesser known one. Dim style, M-leader align is a really popular one that shows up on some test questions sometimes, lesser known. Dim t edit and dim space. So these are all lesser known commands that you could see on a test question. Make sure you know how to create a fit viewport on a layout page. That's another popular topic. Practice using XREFs. So this is another one that a lot of people don't know how to do, and we'll practice doing some of them as we go through some practice tests. But XREFs, or cross-references, are basically where I link two drawings together in AutoCAD. And they also do a lot of things with binding XREFs. So what happens if I bind one into another? What happens to the file names? And I've given you a little preview here of what happens. So when I bind one drawing into another, it puts dollar signs in between the names. So it has the file name, $0, and then the layer name of that drawing. So we'll look at some of this some more later. It probably makes no sense right now, but we'll do some practice questions later on in the semester to kind of figure out how this works. Make sure you know how to use annotative text, leaders, dimensions, annotative hatch patterns, and how to set an existing object to be annotative instead of standard. So we'll work on that some more this semester. Make sure you know your various selection methods. So the blue selection window, the green selection window, how to do a fence selection, how to shift click to select or unselect objects. And finally, make sure you know your single line text justifications and how the grips for each one work. So depending on how you have your single line text justified, the grips may show up in a different location depending on if it's middle center or middle left or top left or bottom right. They like to pick little tiny detailed stuff like that most people wouldn't even care about or pay attention to ask you about on the test. So we're going to go through all types of practice questions over the next several weeks, but I want you to kind of take this and print it out keep it at home or keep it, at school in your laptop bag or whatever, wherever you are. Keep it in your notebook so that you can go through these, maybe every couple weeks, because you're going to forget some of these. But keep it handy as you're doing the practice tests so you can remember, to do the ID command or the list command or how to Alt Tab. So keep this as kind of your strategy sheet as you prepare for this exam. So that's it for this video. Just wanted to quickly go through these tips and get you familiar with some of them so that you can try to utilize them on our practice tests throughout the semester. So good luck going through these, and I will see you in the next video.